Hi and welcome again to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video, and today we're going to be talking about UX jobs, terminology a little bit, and what things might be right for you to consider if you're considering a career change in UX. So let's get started. I am a firm believer in research, which I've touched upon a little bit in an introduction video that I've made, where when you're considering a new job, it's good for you to do the research about what that job will be like day to day. You should think, okay, is it the salary I want? Is it the kind of interactions that I want? And learn a little bit more about what it's like in different companies, stuff like that. So I'm going to be trying to touch a little bit about that. Do you like working in a team? Do you like working on visual design? What is it that you really shine and light up and, is your kind of thing? So I'm going to introduce some job positions that you might want to consider. Some of them are related to UX, some of them are within UX. There's going to be a lot of caveats, and the caveats are stuff like, hey, this is a disclaimer that these jobs might be different depending on what country you're in, what location you're in, how big the company is, what the dynamic within the company is. So all of those things might change what this job role does. The other thing is maybe my experience is different than someone else's experience. I might also have different opinions about these jobs, and I'm also really willing to be wrong. So if I'm wrong, just let me know in the comment section, or if you don't agree. There also may be a few trigger warnings, as I have a few hot takes about some of these jobs. So that's said. And now we're just going to jump right into it. So my first role is obviously the UX designer. So UX designer, customer experience designer, and product designer. Those are the three that I want to start with. So customer experience might be labeled as CX, and that's something that's kind of new and hot right now. And my hot take is that they're the same. They're the same. They're all the same. Like, it's the same thing. It's supposed to be the same thing. If you look at the Nielsen Norman recommendation for what a UX designer was supposed to be, and that's kind of coming from the father of what a UX designer was in the inception of what a UX designer was. It wasn't just about how somebody interacts with a digital experience. It was, okay, how do I go to a store, and how do I find this thing that I want to buy, and what's the packaging like, and do I put it in the trunk, and does it fit in my trunk, is there parking at the store? All of those things are the experience that your customer or your user has. It's kind of since been watered down to basically just be digital design, I think, or maybe even physical design of how somebody uses a certain thing, but it's always supposed to have considered the end-to-end experience of that customer journey and all of their touch points and interactions with your company, really. So that's kind of, that holistic approach is now kind of labeled customer service or customer experience design, and that's kind of a new and hot one. I think that that's more for people who are interested in high-level thinking. They can think about a lot of things all at once. User experience design, I think, is really good for people that like problem solving. They already have a natural amount of empathy. They tend to be highly creative. They tend to be highly collaborative. And product design, I think, only differs a little bit because you're supposed to also consider the company's strategy and how the product fits in within a suite for a company. And the issue I have with that being different than a UX designer is that if a UX designer makes the best design possible, if they don't have the company in mind, if they don't have that strategy in place, it probably won't be successful anyway, in my opinion. So you may as well think like a product designer, even if you are a UX designer. That's my opinion. Moving on, I have a UI designer, a visual designer and graphic designer roles. So a UI designer does user interface design. Apparently these are people that just do their sweet spot is the visuals. They like to spend the time, maybe they might even be working with doing design system work. They really love to have those juicy dribble kind of shots. They really enjoy that. They really like the visuals. A visual designer, I feel like these roles tend to also answer to marketing sometimes. So visual designer, I think, is just like designing visuals for digital products, but in my opinion, it can also report to marketing. It can also do it's like miscellaneous visual work. They can also sometimes be like icons, whatever, within a design system team, or they might work on a design system team specializing in components and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about graphic design too much because I personally don't know a lot about it, and most of the time that I've worked with people in graphic design, they have been coming to me and I'm their tutor or their design mentor because they want to switch out of graphic design and they want to move into either UI or UX design. In my opinion, graphic design was something that was more ubiquitous like right in the beginning of like the whole tech boom, before we've been pushed so like into this digital space. So I was always thinking like posters, yeah, sometimes it's like websites or like logos and stuff, but I think that there's a natural progression that we kind of started off with graphic design, and within the digital space it's kind of become more and more niche into UI and visual design. So the thing I'm going to say about these jobs are God bless you people that do these jobs. I have a fine art background and I thought that I wanted to be a UI designer until I realized that I just feel like it's not my mission, because my mission is to make something as successful as possible. So while the visual design is important, the UX design has to be there. It has to be nailed. And I feel like you can have good UX design and maybe not great UI design, and it's still a meaningful product. But if you have amazing UI design and the UX design isn't there, I just don't feel like it's going to be a successful product. I've always had to do both. In every career thing that I've ever done, I've always been expected to do the UX and to do the UI. And I didn't realize that people actually have one or the other until I started interviewing other people that had worked in design agencies. So UX designers, they often do the wireframes and the journey for the customer or the user, and then the UI designer will make those come to life and do some of the higher level decisions about what kind of drop shadow you're using and like the whole, I don't mean to talk down to UI designers, it's just that it's a totally different space than UX. UX is like the how and the why, and the UI design is more like how the look and feel of that experience is. That's probably a better scenario or explanation. Moving on. Oh, wait. People that tend to be into this are, I think it's less collaboration because you really get the work and then you can do the visuals. So if you really like the visual aspect and you are not that much into the high level problem solving and the collaboration dynamic as much, then I think that this might be a more fulfilling space for you to be in. Moving on, I wanted to talk about something that doesn't get a lot of credit, which is a UX writer. The other thing that I wanted to say about this is that I think that sometimes they're called content strategists. I think there's a little bit of a difference. A UX writer, these are the people, if you're a UX writer and you're watching this, I just want to hug you. You and I, man, I'm there for you. Whatever you need, I got you. If you're good at your job, I love you. Because UX writing or UI writing is so hard, and you don't realize how hard it is until you realize that you want to convey something on an error message in 2 sentences, and you spend an hour trying to figure out what those 2 sentences should say to be the most clear, recognizable, unambiguous for the entirety of your user population. That is what a UX or a UI writer does. They're amazing at their job. They don't get enough credit, and I feel very strongly about this. I'm very passionate about this. But yeah, so they write all the content within a website or a product or anything like that. So the tone, I should say, the tone of the branding has to be cohesive. So how does it sound? Do you have an error message that says, oops, this didn't go through? Is that annoying? Are you quirky? Are you informal? Like all those things a UX or a UI writer has to consider as they write their, the content for that page. I also think that you have to do a little bit of this in UX design, and you should be like proficient at it, but this is also its own separate job. A content strategist, I think, also considers much more of like, search engine optimization and like what content is needed and what the gaps are in the product to make it more successful. I think that there's a little bit more of a marketing touch to a content strategist. If someone's a content strategist and I'm wrong, please correct me, like let me know in the comments, because I don't get to work with a lot of content strategists. This is what I'm piecing together from my experiences. So UX writers, UI writers, they tend to be very detail-oriented. They love words and they love to be like precise about conveying their meaning. I think it takes a lot of patience, and they're amazing and I love them. Moving on. UX research. UX research is also something that I think that you're going to need to do if you want a career in product design or UX design. I think you're expected to kind of be able to do a little bit of that. But UX research often has its own role in a different company, especially if the company is large and has the money and the funding and the maturity, the UX maturity, to understand that they need to pay somebody to be a separate researcher for their products. UX research is so important for the success of your products, and I don't often get to work with them, just because they're usually really busy on the top priority for that company or whatnot. If you work in a really established company, like when I was at Google, there were multiple researchers on my team, and they had a lot of work to do. So UX researchers tend to be highly analytical. What they're going to do day to day is they're going to set up studies. I won't go into this, but there's like quant and qual. Like, do a lot of people get a survey and then you get the analyze, numbers based on survey results and stuff like that? Or do you conduct one-on-one interviews where you talk about how that user feels about something and the struggles and the pain points they have about their interaction with the product, being qualitative and the other one being quantitative, as far as I know. UX researchers, man, once again, I do love UX researchers, and I love working with them. They tend, to really be able to like plan and be methodical and to be highly organized. I was told that I would make a really bad UX researcher because I don't really have a poker face. I can't just sit there and like lie and not be caught or anything like that. So if you have a good poker face, you might be good at being a UX researcher. I wanted to move on to marketing and branding. Marketing and branding is a totally separate field, totally separate jobs. So branding is more like, think about everything that makes Nike Nike or everything that makes Google Google. It's the colors, the font, just everything that fits together to understand like what the identity is for that brand, to make it memorable, to make it exciting. So that's a separate job. And then marketing is basically like, how do we reach people and make this appealing for them to want to use it? How do we get expand our growth and our reach to new customers? So that might be like emailing, ad campaigns, social media, stuff like that. Branding, they'll usually have a branding guideline. They'll, go through different iterations to find the right branding material for the brand that they're working on. I don't work with these people a lot because this is usually done before I get there. You may, if you're in a startup or something, you may have to do a little bit of this. It's not uncommon that design reports to marketing. I don't like it when that happens because I feel like UX design is all about making the best experience for the user, and marketing's kind of more on the company side of, well, how do we kind of like make sure this gets to people? So I think that there's kind of a misalignment with what the main driving force that motivates that job or is concerning for that job. Like in UX design, you don't want to just push your product on people. You don't want people to just use your product. You're not selling anything in UX design, which I have a lot of mentees that come from marketing, and they have a hard time making that shift where it's like, oh, I just care about the person's pain points and I make the product better for them. I don't just convince them to use the product. So that's a really big disconnect that I see that I want to call out. People that are good at marketing are people that like kind of a high, fast-paced thing. They like social media. They like visuals, and they tend to be kind of smooth talkers, and they're like good at selling, as one would imagine. Branding I don't know that much about. It's really interesting. It's really high level. I think you have to have a lot of like savvy in order to understand how to do it and do it effectively and know how people are going to respond to a brand. So kudos to people in those roles. I want to move to all my PMs. Where are all my PMs at? So I have the PM of being a product manager. I have being a project manager and being a program manager. So I still confuse these just because there's so many of them, but they all do different things. So a project manager and a product manager can kind of be similar because a project manager is just managing that project. So that project could be construction, it can be putting in a new room in your house or something, but product manager is much more, they say, the CEO of the product. So let's say I had an app and I hire a product manager. He or she, whatever, would kind of consider what the vision is, and they work closely with engineering and with UX design to make those decisions about, okay, well, this is our approach, this is our strategy, these are the features that get made. They're often the axis of how everybody communicates and becomes on the same page for the decisions that are being made that you're working on for that product. So these people are good at juggling. They're good at presentation. They're good at like big picture thinking. They tend to come from an engineering background, the ones that I've worked with, but they could come from whatever background. They're highly important. The best PMs will work very closely with UX design to understand their users and make an effective product together, and also work with engineering to make sure it's feasible and it can be delivered on time. So it's a very difficult job, and if you work with a bad product manager that doesn't understand UX design, it's incredibly frustrating. So always look for that when you're when you're interviewing or anything like that they understand the importance of design, they understand the importance of research, because that's one of the first things that get cut, and do take time to look at that. Project manager, I said already, it's specific to that project. Program manager is kind of like the PM for PMs, if you will. It's a touch point for an entire program. And that's often similar to like initiatives, bigger initiatives within the company, and working with cross-functional teams, if you will. So many different teams might have to come to a program manager to say, hey, like, what is everybody that's reporting to you or under your program doing about this? Or like, how do we get this information? What's going on with this initiative? So that person has to be incredibly good at stakeholder management and juggling and timelines and stuff like that. That's kind of a whole suite of roles that kind of coincide with similar, my mind's blanking, but they have to all be really good at like managing people, timelines, expectations, all of that stuff. And now I'm going to go into my final set of jobs, which is front-end engineer and full-stack engineer. So these are engineering roles, and why am I bringing this up? So front-end engineering is the person that, if you're a UX designer, you might work very closely with, because they're going to actually develop the front end of your product, the look and the feel, and how everything, if you deliver them a mock, they're kind of tasked to make that mock in the product. Like, it should look the same or similar. And this is an engineering role, so they're probably going to be using like JavaScript and CSS and HTML and stuff like that. A full stack engineer is an engineer that can do the front and the back, which is why it's the full stack. But so not only the look and feel and how it works, but if you need a database, if you need, you know, all that other stuff to make it a solid product that makes it functional. And these people that I work with typically, like in stand-ups and stuff like that, if you're just amazing at being a front-end engineer, you can be like they call them a unicorn. If you're a front-end engineer or somebody, a unicorn is basically somebody that can do it all, so that they can do the design and they can do the coding aspect of making it come to life. If you are one of those magical people, I salute you. My camera super died in the end, so I just want to finish this up by talking about engineering a little bit. And we're talking about front-end engineering, back-end engineering, this weird hybrid of full-stack engineering, and another role which you might see called a UX engineer. And I think UX engineer is probably closest to somebody who is that unicorn status of being able to kind of speak design and in that language and advocate for the user, as well as do the coding in whatever the front-end language is to take the mocks and do a live prototype, or even, you know, code whatever you're doing, if it's a website or an app or whatnot. But the importance is that you should always figure out who the right engineer to talk to is, because they might be, you know, on mobile or back end or front end or on your project or not on your project. So there needs to be some detective work when you talk to engineers. And if you're interested in engineering, it tends to be highly analytical. There can be a lot of math, and I think it does require a lot of patience, because you have to, you know, debug, and it's kind of like problem solving and puzzles and kind of that kind of thing about trying to figure out what's working, what's not. It's a really important job, because this is how the end user interacts with whatever you've built. So if you are shipping an app, then you may have designed something in Sketch and you hand off to an engineer, and then they actually code that design and that journey and the product so that somebody can open up their phone, go and download it and start using it and have that experience as you've intended them to have it. So that's all I had to say. Those are all the jobs and roles that I can think of. If I left something out, if I got something wrong, if there was a job that you wanted to see that I didn't include, please comment below. And if you like this video, please do like it and subscribe if you're interested. And I'll see you in another episode soon. Bye.